Hey guys, welcome to this week's Q&A. I said last week that I thought I would be able to answer all the questions I got this week because there's been less questions, but I actually got more questions than I predicted this week, so it doesn't look like I'll be able to answer all of them, but if I don't get to answer your question this week, then just repost it onto this Patreon post, and hopefully I'll answer it next time. And don't forget to post any new questions you have. Don't forget to like any questions that you want answered. So without further ado, let's jump in. So Derek Lee, or Lay, asks, you mentioned somewhere that you'd finally got to talk to cats, and that the both of you really hit it off. Now do you think you could tell us more about this encounter? In particular, I want to know whether Katz is aware of MIA, and if yes, how he's taking it. Yeah, so I've talked to Katz directly 2 times, basically. The first time was in 2015 or 2016. I think maybe early 2016, like January. Basically, I got an email from Khatzumoto saying that Khatzumoto was going to be giving out kind of regular consultations, and you could pay to talk to him on a regular basis. And this wasn't directed at me as an individual. It was one of the email list type of thing. So if you were on the right AJAT email list, then you got sent this thing. And it was written, in the cat style, super long, telling you about how it was such a good deal and all this stuff, but it wouldn't tell you what the prices were. And then it finally got to the prices, and it was outrageously expensive. But I had been such a big fat fan of Khatzumoto for so long, and Khatzumoto had kind of disappeared from the internet a long time ago, and there was so much kind of mystery around what he had been up to that I just felt like I couldn't pass up the opportunity. And so I paid for the cheapest version of his consultation thing. He had like multiple tiers, like bronze, golden, silver, golden, platinum, and things like that. And it was like, if you paid for the bronze one, then you could like just do messaging him on like Skype, but no calls. And then there was different ones. And then on the most expensive one, you could like video call him whenever you want or something. So I paid for 1 week of the cheapest one, which was just being able to talk to him on like Skype Messenger, which was $200. And basically we talked, like I kind of told him like, hey, I don't actually need help with anything because I'm pretty much already really fluent and everything worked perfectly for me. But I just wanted to talk to you, and like maybe I thought of this as a chance to kind of say thank you for all that you've done to me. And so we talked about a lot of stuff. It was really just talking, and it felt like we were just talking as friends. But in the back of my mind, I always knew, like, well, he's really only talking to me because I'm paying him to. It's kind of like a therapist or something. And it was cool. We talked about a lot of stuff. We agreed on a lot of stuff. It was kind of a lot of just, like, jacking each other off about how the school system is bullshit and no one knows what they're doing with language learning and all this other stuff. I even gave him some advice about SRS stuff because, I'd done a lot of thought into that. And I asked him about a lot of stuff, and he didn't tell me anything about his personal life, even though I asked him. Like, he wouldn't even tell me where he was. But he told me he's still doing Cantonese and Mandarin and Japanese, obviously. And I asked him if he was doing Korean, because at one point Tikyo Sam had said in some text posts that Katz was also fluent in Korean, and he was like, oh no, I just learned the writing system and memorized like one K-pop song. I don't actually know any Korean at all. And basically, I remember I didn't actually learn anything useful talking to him because he'd kind of said everything he had to say on the AJAT site. And part of me was hoping that he would have discovered all these new things while he was gone. Because I guess I should give a little background. Like, Khatzumoto was really active on the AJAT website, like posting new ideas until probably around 2012 or 2013. And then he kind of started to post less and less, and then he kind of disappeared. And so before he disappeared, he was basically having all these new ideas. Like, yeah, you should do lazy kanji. You should do MCDs. You can, he had all these different new ideas and stuff like that. And so I was hoping that since he disappeared, like it's been a few years since he disappeared, he would have developed that even more and had all these even new crazy ideas that no one had heard about yet. But it turned out that that wasn't the case. It kind of seemed like his own ideas about language learning had kind of stopped at the time he disappeared, and maybe that was why he disappeared. He didn't have that much more to say. So unfortunately, I didn't really learn that much new stuff, but it was still really cool just to talk to him. and we got along really well. I asked him about pitch accent because that was when I was first starting to like realize that pitch accent, that I wasn't going to acquire pitch accent naturally, and he just didn't care at all. He just brushed it off like, oh no, just pick it up naturally. You don't need to study that stuff. If you studying that stuff doesn't work, blah blah blah. And he was like, oh yeah, sometimes natives will correct my pitch accent. Like I think, and he was like, yeah, I used to say shio the wrong way, but so it seems like he was totally unaware of how much he messed up pitch accent, or at least just didn't care. And so that was kind of disappointing. But, and then I was, we seemed to be really close. No, sorry, not close, but I mean, we seemed to like really get along and like almost be friends, right? And so by the end of the week, I was wondering like, hey, maybe we can just become normal friends or at least acquaintances. But as soon as I stopped paying, he completely stopped talking to me and he wouldn't reply to anything that I said. And so it was like, okay, I guess I was just a customer and he was just being really nice and like acting like he liked to talk to me so that I would keep paying. And that was kind of expected, so it was like, whatever. But I saved that whole conversation, or not, I mean, I saved all the conversations we had that week. I might make a video in the future, like, going into the specifics, because he did have some cool stuff that he said, like some cool metaphors and stuff that he hadn't said on the AJAT website, and I think it would just be cool for, like, I think people would enjoy seeing our interactions. And so then I didn't talk to him again for, like, 2 years, and then around the middle of 2017, after I was in the middle of doing my Patreon thing, I messaged Khatzumoto on Patreon, and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember, but we talked for 1 week. I paid for your consultation thing. You probably have seen my videos at one point. I'm making videos about AJAT and all this stuff, and I don't know, this was before I before I created the MIA brand. So that was when I was still just calling everything I was doing AJAT. So I was like, basically, I'm making all these videos about AJAT, and I'm making money from it from Patreon, so it just seemed kind of weird that I wasn't in contact with you, because AJAT is really your thing. So it'd be just cool to talk about stuff. Maybe we can help each other out. You have a Patreon as well. Maybe we could work on something together. And I didn't think he was going to reply, but I was like, hey, it's worth a shot. I'll just send him this message. And he replied. And he gave, sent back this long reply with all, like, responding to all the individual things that I said. And he was like, oh yeah, it's cool. We should definitely get in touch. I think what you're doing is pretty cool. And then, he gave me his phone number and his Skype. And the Skype was the same Skype account. It wasn't his, like, personal Skype. It was actually the same Skype account that we had talked on when I was doing the consultation thing, which was, like, probably a throwaway he made just for that. But he, like, logged back into it for probably the first time in a while. And so that same day, we talked for, like, 4 or 5 hours, just back and forth about AJAT and about stuff. And Khatzumoto, basically, he wanted to create, like, a video, or, like, basically a podcast series, where me and him would choose, like, an AJAT article or some topic about learning languages, and we just talk about it for, like, a half hour. And then we'd sell these, like, per episode. And I was like, well, that's cool, but maybe we can, like, give it free to our patrons, because if there's people sending us money monthly, it's kind of weird to then charge them again for what we create. It's like they're paying us to make stuff, and then they have to pay more for the thing that we make. That seems kind of, like, weird and disingenuous. And he was like, oh no, there's, like, weird psychology where people who pay like to pay more or something. Maybe it's a legitimate thing. But I thought that was weird. But I was still just, like, pretty on board, because Khatzumoto, that was, like, the only way that he was willing to do it. Like, it was clear that he just wanted to make money. He didn't really care about helping people learn languages anymore. He just wanted to make money. And I was still like, well, yeah, that's kind of unfortunate, but hey, I still want to work with Khatzumoto. Like, if that's what I have to do to collaborate with Khatzumoto, then it's cool, and I'll still keep doing all the other stuff. And so I was like, yeah, okay, cool, let's do that. And we kind of talked about the details of that. And then I kind of just talked about, oh yeah, and by the way, he also said, like, oh yeah, it's totally cool if you use the AJAT brand name and stuff. Just make sure that you, like, give me credit, and, don't take credit for anything you didn't do. But besides that, yeah, it's all cool. And I kind of asked him about the website. I was like, so the website's a total clusterfuck. Like, what's the deal with that? Like, it's kind of a big downside of AJAT. It like turns a lot of people away and stops, and it kind of inhibits the growth of more people finding out about AJAT. And I expected that he was going to know that the site was a clusterfuck, because it's like, go to the site. It's a clusterfuck. It's really obvious. How would you not be aware of that? But he actually seemed to like not know what I was talking about. And he was like, what do you mean? What's wrong with the site? And I explained it to him in detail, and I explained some very easy changes he could make. Like, he could make these changes in 30 minutes, just reorganizing where things are on the site, and it would make it way better. I was like, well, first of all, make the homepage, instead of this awkward, like, are you new or are you here, make it just like the introduction page or something. And like, make the table of contents linked at the top bar so that you can easily get there, and like just a few things like that. And I explained to him how basically, because the whole site right now revolves around trying to sell the products, that people who don't know that much about AJAT and go to the site just think that it's a scam and then leave. And the only people who would be willing to pay money for those products are people who understand the legacy of AJAT. And so if you want to sell the products, you have to make the site revolve around helping people understand the legacy. If you just say, hey, buy these products, and people have no context, they don't know anything about you or anything, it's just this really sketchy looking website trying to sell this like $2,000 program, no one's going to do that. And I was like surprised that he didn't already know these things, but he actually seemed to be like, oh wow, this is like he seemed to be like actually like taking notes on it. Hold on, I'm really thirsty and I forgot to get water. I got an Aeron chair. See, but I got it used at a liquidation place. In case you don't know, this is like the most popular chair, like ergonomic chair in the world. And it's been for like 20 years. It's really expensive, but I got it used, so it wasn't as expensive. I also tried out this other super expensive chair for a month. If you saw my last one's the green one. It was also used. But I really like the chair. It sucks that it was green, because that was really ugly. But now I'm testing out this other one, and you can return them after a month if you don't like it. And so if I don't like this one, then I might return it and just buy the new version of the last one I had in a color that I like. But anyway, if you sit in a chair for many hours a day and you have a shitty chair, like, definitely buy a nice ergonomic chair. It will change your life. Changed my life. Like, my whole body feels better all the time, and I have way less back pain, and I sleep better. It makes a huge difference. Like, the good chairs, like, effortlessly hold you in the correct posture, so that you are actually in a position where you're not straining your body all day. But anyway, so Khatzumoto kind of talked about how how the website got to be that way. And he basically was like, well, not enough people wanted to read all these long articles. And so I thought, I'll just like spoon feed them to them. And so he basically said that his final plan for the website was that it was just going to be an email box. It was just like a box where you put in your email, and then you slowly get emails every day that like just give you like 1 or 2 paragraphs of information. And over time, people would like consume the entire website's worth of content that way. And I kind of explained to him how like that will never work. Like, trying to spoon feed people the bare minimum isn't a good strategy, because in order to make AJAT work, you have to have all this theory and you have to have it down. And the other thing I said is that people aren't going to be motivated to completely change their life unless they actually understand the mechanics of how the method work, right? It's like, they're not just going to blindly take your word for it and be like, oh yeah, do all this crazy stuff and then it'll work. Trust me. You have to explain to them why it will work so that they have their own understanding, and then they can justify it to themselves. But he didn't seem to like understand these things at all. It seemed like he didn't understand like the psychology of the average person at all. And so it was kind of like, oh, AJAT's kind of a clusterfuck, because Khatzumoto like doesn't really understand how normal people think. And anyway, after that day, like when we talked for like 5 hours about lots of stuff, and a lot of that was me trying to like explain to him like everything that I thought he was doing wrong with the AJAT website, then he never replied to me again. Like, he was like, we were like, okay, talk to you later. Good talking. And I was all psyched. So I was like, damn, Khatzumoto's my friend now. But like, I did it. I came this whole way from being Khatsumoto's fanboy to being Khatsumoto's like acquaintance who who like I can talk to without even paying him money. Because before it didn't really count because I was paying him money to talk to me. But he never replied to me after that. I sent him a bunch of messages on Skype. He never replied. And I called the phone number that he gave me, and I got his voicemail, and it was definitely his voice on the voicemail, but he never answered. And that was it. I never heard from him again. So I know that he knows about MIA, because how could he not? It's like, if you look at anything related to age out on the internet, I'm there. And then so is MIA. So I don't know what he thinks of it. I think he doesn't really care about any of this stuff besides that he wants to make money. Like, honestly, like that was my impression, is that like he wants to learn languages himself, but he's not really into the like helping other people learn languages. And I don't blame him for that. It's like a totally different thing. Like, it took me a while to really come to terms with the fact that doing age out or MIA and like making content and engaging with other people, that has nothing to do with learning languages yourself. If you just want to learn languages, that's actually, it just takes away from that, because now you're just spending a lot of time talking to people in English and trying to convince people of ideas and stuff. And so I like doing both, but I think Khatzumoto, he wasn't really into that, like engaging with other people, trying to convince them of stuff, getting criticized and all that stuff. And so when he realized that's what it was, he was kind of just like, I think I'm good, I'm out. And he still wants money. So when he sees money, he'll like come back and try to get that money, but he's not really still into the game, like, you know, into trying to help people learn languages. So he never changed the website. I thought maybe he would change the website, take some of my advice. He never did. He never changed anything, and he never talked to me again. So I doubt we'll ever talk again. Now I've talked to Tikyo Sam and other people who used to be close to him, and they all say that basically Khatzumoto kind of cut them off. He just lives in Canada with his girlfriend and like doesn't really go out that much, and that's just the kind of guy he is. So yeah, that's that pretty much. And yeah, maybe I'll make a video in the future, like I said, talking about the conversations that we had that week, because there's some pretty good stuff in there. So that was pretty long, but I thought maybe a lot of you guys would be interested in that. So Sidma asks, "Hi Matt, I upped my active immersion in the last 2 weeks, but I don't know exactly I don't exactly know what to look for while immersing. What should I prime my brain to do? Should I look for words I know? Should I just try to get the general meaning while not really caring about the words and grammar? Or should I look for I+1 sentences? I know this wouldn't be much importance once I get 75% or so comprehension, as you can distribute your focus more easily, but I understand at best 20%. Should I just watch and not think too much about it?" Okay, so basically, what should you be doing with your attention as you actively immerse? Now, basically, the answer to this question depends on what stage you are in the process. So if we're going to break this up very broadly into 3 steps of the process, so let's say like beginner, intermediate, advanced. So when you're a beginner, like you said, you're understanding 20% or less, basically keeping up with the plot will probably be not that realistic unless, you know, there's a lot of visuals that make it really clear what's going on. But basically, following all the details of the plot probably just isn't really going to be an option. And so you have to play the game of how many words can I understand? How many phrases can I pick out? How many, like, what percentage of most sentences can I understand? It's kind of what I talked about in my video, how to have fun in a language that you suck at. Basically, in this one, you just want to be trying to find new words that sound familiar to you, pick out the words that you do know, try to just hear the sounds as clearly as possible. So you're kind of just looking for little chunks that you can pick out and grasp on. Like I remember when I was learning Chinese, that was definitely the stage that I was at, and I still enjoyed myself quite a bit, just trying to basically hear as many words as I could. Like, could I hear all the sounds that was entering my ears? And could I pick out all the words that I had learned when I was listening, you know? And when I heard a chunk of words, could I put those together and guess what the meaning was? So you're kind of just trying to play that game. When you can understand around 75%, then you're kind of just, then actually following the plot in detail really becomes more of an option. And so you want to kind of basically play that, you want to shift into just trying to get the main gist of what's being said. Like, what was the main idea of each sentence? And not really get caught up in the minutia of what exact word was used or what form that word was in, or if that word has multiple meanings, which one it was. Not really worry about that. Just try to understand basically the message that's being said and focus on that. And once understanding the message of what's being said becomes easy and effortless, so now you're in advanced, like once you understand 90 to 99%, and now you want to play the game of going back to paying attention to the form of what's being said. So, you can pay attention to what type of things do Japanese people tend to say? What words do they use to express those ideas? How do they say those words in terms of phonetics, right? Or even like, what kind of facial expressions do they have? In what way do they bob their head as they speak? And all these different things. So you want to be trying to notice all the little minutia and detail of the way that they do things. And so that's kind of, how I would think about it. And I'm going to talk more about it in the future. But so, if you're a beginner, focus on, the main thing is pick out as many words as possible. Try to hear as many sounds as possible. Try to like map everything you're hearing to hiragana in your head, even if you don't understand it. And of course, you're not going to be able to do that perfectly, but just try to do that. Make an effort to hear more and more and recognize more and more. And the act of using your attention in that way, trying to hear more than you currently can, is going to cause you to progress really quickly and learn to hear more and more. So Joseph Condor asks, what do you think is the minimum to maintain a current level of fluency? For example, if you're on vacation and don't have tons of immersion time, what is the minimum to just retain the level you're at? SRS reps? How much immersion time on top of that? Not for any improvement, but just stasis. I don't know that word. Sorry. It's like in English. Stasis, maybe. I also wonder about getting to a comfortable level of fluency and just wanting to keep that level. What is the minimum required for that? I feel like knowing this would help my planning and end goals, etc. for studying. So, this is a realization that I had myself, and I've talked to many other people, and they've all had independently. But there's no such thing as maintaining a certain level of ability. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And trying to keep an exact level of ability without getting any better or any worse, that's actually the hardest thing of all. It's actually easier to just keep getting better than to try to like somehow maintain the exact level of ability you have without getting any better or any worse, right? Because you're always forgetting stuff and you're always learning stuff whenever you're interacting with the language. There's always movement and shifting. You can't just freeze your brain in a certain state. And so the way I would think about it is, so what you really are doing when you're maintaining is you're either getting better very slowly or you're getting worse very slowly. There's always going to be some sort of trajectory there. And so you want to think about it as, which one of those two do you want to be doing? So if you're talking about a short-term type thing, like let's say that you know that your work's going to be very busy for the next 6 months, and so you're going to go on maintenance mode for those 6 months, but after that you're going to go more hardcore. Or, you're a polyglot and you're balancing all these languages, and so for the next 6 months to a year, you're going to be working on this language, and then you're just going to be maintaining Japanese. So in that case, it might be okay to be getting worse very, very slowly. And that means that you could really reduce the amount of time that you spend on Japanese pretty heavily, right? Like if you just keep up with your SRS reps and then basically spend at least an hour a day doing something active, whether that's reading or listening, like try to mix it up, and then maybe occasionally do some passive listening, then you can, only get worse very, very slowly. And so if you say do that for 6 months to a year, then it'll be very easy to pick it back up and catch up to where you were before and then continue to improve. And so I would say basically SRS reps, which won't be that much because your reps will go down. You won't be adding new cards, so your reps will go down pretty quickly. And then aim for an hour a day, and then maybe a few hours a week of passive. An hour a day active. But if you want to be improving very slowly, so this is more of an indefinite thing, like, okay, I'm kind of done actively getting better at Japanese, but I want to maintain my level for the next, 4 years before I move to Japan, or like the next 4 years while I work on this other skill full time. And so in that case, you probably want to be going on the getting better very slowly time. And in that case, I would say probably like 2 to 3 hours a day, active, and 1 to 2 hours passive. That's what I aim for these days. Like adding some new SRS cards, and then basically you can like try to like at least read for an hour and actively listen for an hour, and then maybe spending an hour on one specific area that you want to improve. Like if you want to improve your pronunciation, then like just 1 hour on shadowing maybe, or like if you want to improve your kanji skills, then just 1 hour like SRSing like Kanken books or something. So that is like 2 to 3 hours a day in order to continue to improve at some rate without getting any worse at all. And then ideally also some passive here as well is like what I would say. Like I find that it's extremely hard to improve at 3 hour. Like I do about 3 hours a day, I would say, of Japanese, and I find it extremely hard to improve. But I know I still am at some degree. So I know I would say I'm on that trajectory of improving slowly, which is kind of the more positive form of maintenance. Like this really feels like the minimum I can do and not get any worse, basically. And it also depends on what level you're at, right? If you're at a really kind of mediocre level and you kind of have like basic fluency, but you still mostly suck, then, you know, you don't have that much to maintain. So you can probably maintain that pretty easily on like a few hours a week. But I'm talking about if you get to a very high level of fluency and you want to stay at that high level of fluency, then that's kind of applies to what I was just saying. So I should have clarified that earlier. But the more you have, the more work it takes to maintain that. I would say. At least that's my experience. You might think it would be the opposite because, you know, it gets more ingrained or whatever. But if you're learning a language like Japanese as an adult that's entirely different than your native language, then that just doesn't seem to be the case. Like as soon as I take time away from Japanese, I immediately get way worse. And that seems to be the experience of a lot of other people. So Samuel Raki asks, hello, I just started MIA and have been doing RTK/lazy kanji for around 4 months. I must confess, though, that I have not been immersing as much as I should. I have a busy college schedule, so little time for active immersion, lots of time for partially active immersion. As such, most has been audio only. Listening to Japanese for hours a day and understanding maybe 5% ranges between boring and insanity-inducing. And as such, I've stopped a few times. Is there any way to remedy this, or does it get better and I just need to suck it up and power through? I have been doing little watching of anime or drama, mainly due to lack of time, and have been mostly listening to podcasts. Not sure if that's part of my issue. So you need to do active immersion. That's it. You need to do active immersion. If you only do passive immersion, then that's pretty much close to not like doing nothing. Because like I said in my how to do listening immersion video, if you're just doing passive listening, your brain's just going to interpret that as background noise. Not completely, but mostly. You need to do active immersion when you're just sitting and giving your full attention to trying to understand the language. That's what tells your brain that understanding this language is important and it's something that you are invested in and something that, you know, that it needs to work on. And once you do that for like an hour or more a day, then when you listen to the passive listening as well, your brain will go, oh, this is that stuff that we're trying to work on. Cool, let's pay attention. Let's see what we can learn from this. And also, as a beginner, when you understand so little, like, podcasts are a really bad thing to immerse with because, you know, it's going to be so boring and not engaging because there's nothing to help you understand. There's no clues. So it's just going to be you wandering around in the dark. Whereas if you watch anime or drama or something with a visual component that makes it pretty clear roughly what's going on, and then you listen to the audio from that, then you're basically have way more context clues to help you guess what's going on and engage with, right? Like, if there's a scene where you know that person A is very mad at person B because person B, used up all of person A's, like money or something, and then they're yelling at them, you have a rough idea of what they're going to be saying, probably, right? Much more than a random podcast about a random thing that you don't even know, and it's just sound, right? So I would say you need to actively immerse, otherwise you're basically going to make no listening progress at all, and basically aim for an hour a day. Like, if you have a limited amount of time, then just spend half of that time actively immersing. Or you can just do it all on RTK and give up on the listening and saying, well, I'm going to start improving at Japanese after I finish the kanji. That's another option as well. But just know that basically active immersion is the crux for improvement. And if you're not doing like at least an hour of active immersion a day, then you're not really going to get anywhere in terms of acquiring the language. So Karuma asks, hey Matt, so since I'm doing sentence mining for the last 4 to 5 months, I either watched something or made sentence cards. Just looking things up on the go wasn't on my list. I was rather lazy when watching or reading something, and I just wanted to enjoy it instead of stopping all the time to look something up. But lately, I realized that looking stuff up like every few sentences in a book or every few minutes when watching is really beneficial when it comes to learning the language faster. So my question is, since I've only done sentence cards until now, how to decide which words I only look up and which words I actually put on sentence cards? Like, when something seems to stick, just by looking it up once, it's good enough. But the stuff which doesn't stick, should I make sentence cards for those, or should I just let my current mood decide? I don't know, but this seems rather tricky to me. So basically, you're right. There's a lot of things where you're going to look it up one time, and then you're just going to remember it. So clearly you don't want to make a card for that because, first of all, you're only going to be making a certain number of cards a day. And so if you're making a card for something that you would have learned without, then you don't need the card. So the time you're spending repping the card is a waste of time. But then also, let's say you're only making 10 cards a day. Well, now you wasted one of your 10 cards on something that you were going to know anyway, and you missed the opportunity to learn another word. And so you definitely don't want to make cards for things which you can easily learn without a card. I mean, of course, you could learn everything without a card, but I'm talking about, like, you look something up once, it clicks, and after that, you know the word. So basically, when you look up a word, you never know for sure whether you're going to remember it. Even if it feels like it clicks, there's always the chance that when the word comes up tomorrow, you're going to be like, oh crap, I looked up this word yesterday, but I don't remember what it means. And so basically what I would do is, when you look up a word, if you think it's likely, of course, we're just talking about what you're kind of predicting the results are going to be. But if you feel like it's likely that you are going to remember this word without making a card, then just don't make a card. If you feel like it's very unlikely that you're going to remember the word without making a card, then make a card. Now, some of those words where you said, okay, it's very likely that I'll remember this word without making a card. Some of them you'll forget. But Japanese is very limited, so it's going to come up again, right? If it's actually important, it's going to come up again soon. And then you'll find, that will be the test. Oh, I'm pretty sure I looked up this word a few days ago. Do you remember it? And if you didn't, then you can do the test again. That can be like, okay, well, I almost remembered it. I remembered what it meant and the reading of the first kanji, but not of the second kanji. Well, then it's pretty likely that if you just looked it up a second time that day, that it really would just click. Or maybe not. And so, you can then say, oh, I looked this up yesterday, except thinking I'd remember it, so I didn't make a card, but I looked it up today, and I came across it today, and I totally blanked. Well, then you can make the card for it. So basically, if you think you don't need a card, don't make the card. If it turns out that you did, well, then you can make the card then. It's never too late, right? The same words are going to come up over and over. So just always lean on the side of not making a card. And basically, if it turns out that your first decision was wrong, then just go back and make the card later. Only make cards for things that you think are that basically seem very unlikely to that you're going to learn without making the card. So only make a card when you feel like you need to. So Louis DeBrat asks, as a non-Japanese person, what Japanese people do you find particularly insightful or interesting to read or listen to? fiction writers, nonfiction writers, podcasters, philosophers, any suggestion would be appreciated. I find it hard to get interested in a lot of serious Japanese content because so little of their social issues is relatable to us in the West. As a follow-up question, because I suspect the answer might be something like, find interest in the fact that their issues are different. Is there anything you'd recommend to get enough context so that their news thinkers become more interesting to me? So I find it very interesting that you thought I would answer find interest in the fact that their issues are different, because I wouldn't say that, and I don't feel like I'd say that. It's always weird when people like think that they know what I'm going to say, but it's nothing like that I would say. It always is really weird to me because, we all have ideas in our head of like other people and what their thoughts and way of thinking are. And so when I realize that the idea of me in other people's heads are like not actually me and they're like projecting onto me, it's always weird, but that's inevitable. But anyway, I haven't found that many Japanese like basically thinkers that are very interesting to me. I have found some, and I'm going to tell you about them. But I haven't found that many. And I think it's kind of just inevitable because, I'm a Western guy. I'm interested in the kind of stuff that Western people are interested in. And Japanese people, there's just less thought in that area by Japanese people. And when there is thought in that area, it's normally not as good as the one in the West because, let's say for every 10 people who think about topic A that's like relevant in the West, there's one Japanese person that thinks about that same topic. Well, it's just inevitable that there's going to be higher quality content in America because there's 10 times as many people thinking about that topic. So even though you can find Japanese people talking about any topic, if it's a topic that's more relevant in the West than in Japan, then it's just going to be weak. And when it comes to, food for thought and stuff like that, it's not fun to just listen to a weaker version of something that you could get a way better, higher quality one in the West. But so you kind of just like have to accept that. Like for me, I just had to accept it because if you don't, then it just constantly upsets you that you're working so hard to understand this language when really the language that you already can understand has way better content. So I would just embrace that. And for me, I find it really interesting to read Japanese people talking about Japanese, because that's something that you can only really get in Japanese, right? And so you can get a lot of books about like Japanese linguists talking about Japanese and explaining, cool patterns that they realize and stuff. Like here's a random book that I just have that I was just flipping through that I've had for a while. That's about the history of Japanese. That's interesting to read about. And I have a lot of books. Like, hold on, I can grab some and show you. Where are they? I have a lot of books. Okay, I thought I had more, but and I'm pretty sure I do have more. But like, here are two that I found that I was able to find quickly. Like 日本人の言語表現. So this one's pretty interesting. It's like about the way that Japanese people tend to phrase stuff. Like I flipping through it the other day, they're talking about how like Japanese people, when they want to describe abstract concepts, a lot of times they use concrete things as metaphors a lot more than Western languages do, and things like that. And this kind of talks about the personality of Japanese people and why they act certain ways. I know I had more. Let's see. Oh yeah, well, here's one more. That is just about topics related to Japanese. Let's see. Table of contents, like about the creation of like here I was talking about the difference between Hyoljungo, standard Japanese, and actually Tokyo dialect and what they speak in Tokyo, because they're not all the same, and like how the way that people think about the language have changed, and the relationship between classical Japanese and modern day Japanese, and like how specific authors have like changed Japanese forever and stuff like that. A lot of interesting stuff. And so also Japanese history is really good. If you can get into Japanese history, then it's like, of course that's going to be better in Japanese. Or if you can like find other stuff interesting in Japanese, like if you are interested in like Zen, Buddhism, or like of any of like the more traditional Japanese arts and stuff, then that's going to be cool because you can read a lot about that. Besides that, like one thinker that I really love is Okada Toshio. I'll put a link in the description, but he basically is, well, the way I think about him is he's a self-actualized otaku. He's a super otaku that has been an otaku his whole life. He loves anime and manga. He's actually like worked on a lot of anime. There's like a drama where he shows up as a character in the drama, Aoi Hono. But he does this like live stream kind of seminar. Well, he calls it a seminar. It's more just like a lecture that he does once a week on Nico Nico Doga, but then they get uploaded to YouTube, where he just chooses an interesting topic and just talks about it for an hour. And a lot of the time it's about anime or manga. Like he just did a series where he's like analyzing all the Ghibli, well, not all, but a bunch of the Ghibli films, and he talks about like the deeper meanings that he's seen in the Ghibli films and a lot of the imagery and stuff that normal people might not notice. But sometimes he just talks about stuff completely unrelated to anime or manga. Like he talked about his predictions for the world's gonna be like in 10 years in like 50 years, and he's very knowledgeable about a lot of topics. Like sometimes he'll just talk about history, like he was just talking about like well, I can't really I don't know how to describe it in English very well, but like there's a lot of he's very knowledgeable, and he has like a lot of interesting ideas, and he's really good at like pulling together a bunch of different ideas and like linking them into one kind of coherent package. And so I love listening to him talk. I always listen to the lectures when they go up onto YouTube. He's like probably my favorite Japanese thinker who like has really stimulating ideas, but it's the type of stuff that you couldn't find in English. But he's like really my number one. Besides that, like Murakami Haruki has a lot of interesting stuff to say in his novels, but it's more roundabout because it's a novel. You can buy like essays by Essay Shu, like books of just Murakami Haruki like talking more directly about what he thinks about stuff. That can be kind of interesting. Like I was just reading this book that he wrote about being a novelist, and he was talking about like what he thinks what he thinks creativity is. He was like trying to define creativity and different things about that, and talking about how like a lot of pretty interesting stuff. And besides that, there's not too much stuff. Like this guy has some pretty he was like a journalist in Japan like a few decades ago. He had a lot of really interesting stuff. I think you read this Honda Katsuichi. I'm not even sure how you read this name, but I've read some of his stuff. It's pretty interesting. Like this is about the Ainu people, the like indigenous people of Japan, who basically got their culture destroyed by the mainstream Japanese people. And yeah. Also, there's this one Japanese philosopher, Nishida Ikutaro, that I was reading. This is his biography. I was just reading it. It's pretty interesting. He's from over 100 years ago, and I haven't actually read any of his philosophical texts because it's like really dense, like actual philosophical texts. But he got really into Zen Buddhism, and he like meditated a lot, like really hardcore for a period of his life. And I think a lot of his philosophy was based on that. So I was really interested in that. I'm looking forward to learning more about this guy. Let me look at my bookshelf. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's about it. To be honest, Japanese self-help tends to be pretty low quality in my opinion. I mean, there are a lot of good NHK documentaries about stuff if you're interested. But yeah. Oh yeah, also Kazuya, the YouTuber. He talks about Japanese politics, and he kind of breaks it down, and he kind of like points out all the bullshit of the Japanese media, of like the TV stations and the newspapers and stuff. And so he might be a good way to get into Japanese politics. I have never really gotten into Japanese politics personally, but I kind of want to in the near future. I've been looking into that because that would be really interesting if you could get into that and learn more about that. And so, like, if you wanted to, for example, I picked up this book a while ago. I still haven't read it yet, but it's basically like 政治のことよくわからないまま社会人になった人へ. So, a book for people who became adults without really learning that much about politics. So it's basically a book meant for adults about politics, but that doesn't really assume any knowledge and starts really at the beginning. And it has, a lot of, like just flipping through it, has a lot of kind of like diagrams and stuff. And so I think this would be like really good. I'm looking forward to reading this. And then, watching a bunch of Kazuya videos, using Wikipedia. I feel like if you had a decent level of Japanese ability, you could really get into that. And then it would be interesting, right? Because I know that when it comes to things like politics, there are definitely a lot of Japanese thinkers, like this guy, Ikegami Akira. There are, like, a lot of, like, serious content that I think would be interesting. I think politics would be a good way to kind of fill that kind of hunger you have for serious people thinking about stuff. And I want to get more into that in the future. But picking up a book like this would probably help a lot, and Kazuya. And I'll put all the stuff I mentioned in the description. So, okay, I spent a lot of time on that. So last question. Genismint asks, is it worth to learn Japanese if I'm struggling with motivation? I want to have results, but process of learning, it is not fun for me at all. Well, when you say you're struggling with motivation, it really depends if that's a temporary thing or a long-term thing. If you've always struggled with motivation to learn Japanese consistently, then you really want to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Because, like, learning Japanese as itself is a process that's just too long to suffer through, right? Like 10,000 hours to get good, let's say. You're not going to be able to suffer through 10,000 hours. And even if you are, I don't think it's worth it. Because knowing Japanese isn't that special, right? Once you really know Japanese, it doesn't feel that different from when knowing other languages, right? And then what do you get access to that's uniquely Japanese? Well, anime without subtitles, manga, not translated, not that much. So really, if you hate the process, I would say you're ripping yourself off by forcing yourself to go through it. And it's probably not worth it for you. If your motivational stump is a temporary thing and you have been very motivated in the past and enjoyed the process, but you're just running into a slump, then I can give you more kind of pragmatic advice about how, go back and watch your favorite pieces of media in the language. Maybe go try to have some conversations with people in the language. Just revisit why you wanted to learn it in the first place. Try to re-spark, get in touch with your original inspiration. Go read some AJAT articles. If you have videos of me that you like, maybe try watching those. Watching stuff that's pretty easy for you so that you can, realize how much progress you made, or go back and watch things you haven't watched for a while so that you can notice your own progress. Especially reading the articles on the AJAT website about the intermediate blues and things like that. There's a lot of things you can do to re-spark your motivation, but if you've always hated it, then you should just stop, because you shouldn't think of learning Japanese as a means to the end of being fluent in Japanese, but you should think of basically learning Japanese as part of your process, that's your hobby and that's the thing that you do. It's kind of like here's a good way to put it. It's like, they say if you want to be successful with dieting, you can't think of your diet as a temporary change that you make to drop a few pounds so that you can then go back to your old ways, right? If you have that mindset, then you're going to gain the weight back as soon as you lose it. You have to think of it as a permanent shift to the way that you live your life, and that it's a permanent thing. Like, from now on, you eat this way and it's always going to be that way. And if you don't think about it that way, then you're not going to be able to maintain the changes that thing brings. So it's a similar thing of, like, if you want to get good at Japanese, you have to live your life a certain way for so long that you might as well think of it as a permanent shift. And if you don't like that, living your life in that way of immersing as much as possible and making a lot of sacrifices for that and looking stuff up and making flashcards. If you hate all of that, then it's not going to be worth it for you. I can guarantee it. No matter how good you get, it's not going to feel worth it. I don't think so. You're going to feel like you wasted your time. And that's going to be really unfortunate. So you probably should find, your life is so short. You don't have time to be doing things that you hate. Go find something that you love to do, because I'm sure you can find something that's going to be productive and add to your future and that you love to do. And that your goal should always be trying to balance those two. Find something that allows you to access both of those. That's my personal opinion. And if I was going to add a little bit more advice for how to re-spark your motivation if it's a temporary thing, Khatzumoto had the advice of try to go listen to something in a language that you don't know anything of at all, and then that will help you realize how much you understand of Japanese. Like if you're struggling to learn Japanese, go listen to Korean for a little bit and realize, wow, actually I understand quite a bit of Japanese compared to this, And whatever it was that basically inspired you to learn Japanese, try to go get back in touch with that, I'd say. So those were questions for today. Again, repost your questions, post your new questions. And look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thanks so much for supporting me. Lots of cool stuff to come. I'm trying to avoid talking about what I'm going to do before I release it, because then I feel more pressure to get it out on time, and if my plans change, I feel bad. But lots of cool stuff to come. I can promise you that. And keep working hard. Ganbatte ne. See you later, guys.